Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell for new stories. Captain Leon Walker scanned the alien landscape, his boots crunching against the silicate soil of Xylenia. The air was thin but breathable, with the faint scent of ozone and something sweet lingering in the breeze. The sky overhead shimmered with hues of purple and blue, casting an ethereal glow over the rocky terrain. His team had set up a temporary base near a strange, towering structure, the energy readings from which had been impossible to ignore. This was the first sign of intelligent life they had encountered in over 3 years of deep space exploration. Leon adjusted the collar of his uniform, feeling the weight of his role as mission leader. He had been to countless planets, each one more desolate than the last, but something about this world called to him. As he approached the structure, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to discover something monumental. Something that would change everything they knew about the galaxy. The structure before him was a monolithic thing, sleek, angular, and impossibly tall, reaching up into the sky with no clear entryway. The surface was smooth, like polished obsidian, though it emitted a faint, otherworldly hum. His team had spent hours trying to make sense of the readings, but nothing made sense. It was as if the structure had been placed there by a race far beyond their comprehension. "Captain, you need to see this," Lieutenant Mara said, her voice crackling over the comms. Leon turned toward her voice and made his way to the rear of the structure. The ground dipped slightly, revealing a narrow entrance, almost invisible from a distance. It wasn't much of an opening, just a slit in the stone, but it was enough for them to crawl through. The air inside was cooler, and the hum grew louder, vibrating through his chest. They moved cautiously, weapons drawn, scanning for any signs of danger. As they progressed deeper into the structure, the walls began to glow faintly. Strange symbols, not of any language they recognized, danced across the surfaces in pulses of light. The walls curved in an organic way, as if the structure itself were alive. Suddenly, they entered a large chamber, its size staggering. In the center of the room stood an alien woman. She was unlike anything Leon had seen before, with skin that shimmered like polished metal, a radiant, pearlescent glow that seemed to shift as she moved. Her hair was a cascade of iridescent strands, shifting from pale blue to silver. She stood motionless, her eyes locked onto Leon. The moment her gaze met his, she froze, her body trembling. Leon instinctively stepped forward, his mind racing as his crew positioned themselves around him, weapons still raised. There was a sharp, unearthly cry that escaped the woman's lips, a sound of deep sorrow, and before anyone could react, she collapsed to her knees, her arms wrapping around her chest as tears began to streak down her face. Leon's heart skipped a beat. He had encountered many alien species in his career, but none had ever reacted this way. This was no hostile confrontation or cold exchange. This was something entirely different. The woman's sobs echoed throughout the chamber, soft and melodic, as if the sound itself were a form of communication. Leon's translator device sputtered to life, its mechanical voice struggling to make sense of her words. "Protector," she whispered, her voice barely audible, yet it resonated in the still air. The word lingered in Leon's mind like a distant memory. He glanced at his crew, who were just as bewildered as he was. Mara gave him a questioning look, but he didn't have any answers. He had no idea who, or what, this alien woman was. With tentative steps, Leon approached her, his hand outstretched. He had been trained to maintain composure in situations like this, but the sight of her tears unsettled him. There was something about it that felt personal, something that tugged at the very core of his being. "Hey, it's okay," Leon said softly, though he wasn't sure why he said it. His voice seemed to calm her, if only slightly, as she lifted her head to meet his gaze. Her eyes were large, almost otherworldly, glowing faintly with an inner light. She stared at him with a mixture of confusion and longing, as though she were searching for something. Slowly, her trembling hand reached out toward his face, her fingers brushing his cheek with a delicate touch that sent a shiver down his spine. "You don't remember, do you?" she whispered, the words barely a breath on the air. Leon's breath caught in his throat. He stared at her in confusion. What are you talking about? The woman's tears fell faster, her shoulders shaking with emotion. You were the one who saved me. You are the one who. Before she could finish, the translation device sputtered again, but Leon understood. Something about this woman, this place, felt familiar. Like a memory just out of reach. He had no idea what she meant, but there was an undeniable connection between them, something deeper than simple first contact. A voice interrupted his thoughts. Captain, we've got a problem, Mara's voice crackled through his earpiece. The structure, it's starting to activate. I don't think we're alone here. Leon looked back at the woman, who had gone silent, her eyes wide with fear. She took a step back, her hands trembling as if she were fighting an internal battle. You have to leave, she said, her voice breaking. You cannot stay here. The protector. You cannot be here. Confused and now more worried than ever, Leon turned to his team. The energy readings from the structure had intensified, the humming growing louder, almost deafening. The walls began to tremble, and the air itself seemed to crackle with tension. What's happening? Leon demanded, his voice steady despite the rising panic in his chest. We're being scanned, Mara replied, her voice tight with urgency. The structure is trying to identify us. We need to get out of here. Leon's mind raced. There was no time to lose. But as he turned to the woman, who was now standing with a look of desperation on her face, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed a threshold they couldn't undo. What is this place? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The woman's eyes filled with fear. You don't remember, but you will. You have to leave now. Leon's heart pounded in his chest as the ground beneath them began to shake. He didn't know what was happening, but he knew one thing, the woman's tears were not just out of sorrow. There was something far bigger at play, something that threatened not only their mission but the future of their entire race. He turned and signaled his team to retreat, but as they moved toward the entrance, a blinding light erupted from the center of the chamber, swallowing everything in its wake. Leon's world was consumed by light. The blinding intensity of it ripped through his vision, forcing him to shut his eyes against the searing brightness. His body tensed as the ground beneath him quaked. The hum of the structure morphed into a deep, thunderous roar, vibrating through his chest, making his teeth rattle. His heart raced in sync with the pulsating energy, and for a moment, he thought he might lose consciousness. Then, just as abruptly as it had started, the light flickered out, leaving behind an eerie stillness. When Leon opened his eyes, the chamber around him was dark, but the air felt heavier, like the weight of something ancient was pressing down on them. The faint glow of the alien woman's skin was the only source of light now, casting long, shifting shadows across the room. Leon stumbled, disoriented, but caught himself before he fell. His team was scattered around him, equally shaken but unharmed. Mara and the others had already begun to regroup, their weapons still raised in cautious defense. What the hell just happened? Lieutenant Mara's voice crackled through his earpiece. I don't know, Leon muttered, still catching his breath. He turned toward the woman, who stood a few feet away, her body tense as if she were preparing to flee or defend herself. But she didn't move. She simply stared at him, her eyes wide with fear and sadness, her expression caught somewhere between recognition and sorrow. Are you okay? Leon asked, taking a tentative step toward her. Her gaze never left him. You remember me now, don't you? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper, yet it felt like the weight of an entire history pressed against him. Leon swallowed hard. Her words felt like a punch to the gut. There was a strange pull, an undeniable sense of familiarity. He could see it in her eyes, the way she looked at him, like she was waiting for him to awaken to something long forgotten. But the memories refused to come. He didn't know who she was, and yet, he felt as though he had known her all his life. No, he replied, his voice laced with confusion. I don't remember you. I don't understand any of this. Her face crumpled in a way that made Leon's heart ache. You will, she said softly. But only if you choose to. Only if you allow yourself to remember. Leon's mind raced. There was a lingering sense of déjà vu, a gnawing feeling in the back of his mind that told him this wasn't just a chance encounter. This was something personal. Who are you? He asked, the words slipping from his lips before he could stop them. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she placed them against her chest, almost as though she were holding something in place. My name is Ilyana, she said, her voice trembling. But I am not from your time. I am not from your world. Leon frowned. What do you mean, not from my world? Are you saying you're not from this planet? She shook her head slowly. No. I come from the past, from a time long before your people even existed. I am from the last of the Erothians. My people were the caretakers of the galaxy, and you, she faltered, and her breath hitched in her throat. You were once my protector. Leon felt the world tilt beneath his feet. The words hung in the air like a veil of mist that refused to dissipate. Protector, he repeated, disbelief thick in his voice. What do you mean, I was your protector? I don't understand. How can I be your protector if I don't even know who you are? Her eyes softened with a sadness that cut through him. You were part of a great cycle, a cycle that was supposed to save the galaxy from destruction. The Erothians, the last remnants of an ancient race, had the power to protect the cosmos. And you. You were one of us. But something happened. Her voice faltered again, as though the weight of what she was about to say was too much to bear. You were lost. We were all lost. Your memory was erased. Your purpose was stripped from you. Leon staggered back, his mind whirling. His pulse raced. The structure around them hummed again, but it was different now. It was no longer a warning. It felt like a call to something deep inside him, a part of him that had been buried, forgotten. His eyes flicked back to Ilyana. This doesn't make any sense. I'm just a human. I was born on Earth. I'm part of a military expedition. I don't know anything about protecting galaxies. She shook her head gently. You are not just human. Not anymore. Not after what they did to you. What do you mean, what they did to me? Leon asked, a chill creeping down his spine. Ilyana closed her eyes for a brief moment, as if gathering strength. The Council of Seven. They erased your memory. They wiped everything from you. The bond we shared, the power you once held, it's all buried deep within you. But you can still awaken it, if you choose to. Leon felt a surge of unease and disbelief. The Council of Seven? What power are you talking about? I don't have any power. I'm just a soldier. A flicker of hope crossed her face. You do, she whispered. You were born to wield it. You were meant to awaken as the protector of the galaxy. But the Council, they feared you. They feared your potential, so they erased everything, kept you from your true purpose. Leon felt the words crashing against his mind like a tidal wave. His heart pounded in his chest. No, he said, shaking his head. No, this is crazy. There's no way. I don't remember any of this. She reached out for him, her hands trembling. You will, Leon. You will remember. But you have to choose. The galaxy is on the brink of destruction, and only you can stop it. But if you do not awaken, everything will be lost. The Erothians, my people, we will all fade into nothingness. For a long moment, the air between them was thick with the weight of her words. Leon stood frozen, his mind spinning, his heart torn between the fear of the unknown and the strange pull to believe her. To believe that this alien woman, this glowing being from another time, was telling the truth. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to turn and walk away, to retreat back to the safety of his ship and his crew. But something inside him, something deep within his bones, told him that this was no coincidence. This encounter, this woman, it was all connected. And then, like a spark igniting a fire, something shifted within him. His mind cleared, and for the briefest of moments, memories that weren't his flashed before his eyes, visions of star systems, of battles fought on distant worlds, of a protector standing at the center of a war between light and darkness. His chest tightened as the images faded, leaving behind a lingering sense of déjà vu. He didn't understand what it meant, but he felt it. He knew it now. "I don't remember," Leon whispered, his voice hoarse. "But I'll try. I'll try to remember." Ilyena's eyes softened, and she gave a small, sad smile. "That's all I ask, Leon. That's all I ever wanted." As the hum of the structure intensified, Leon knew that his life had just taken an irreversible turn. The weight of his forgotten past had just been laid upon his shoulders, and the future of the galaxy now rested in his hands. The silence in the chamber hung heavy as Leon stood facing Ilyena. Her words, though soft, had struck deep into him, igniting a storm of questions and doubts. He had been a soldier, an ordinary human in an extraordinary world, but now, he was expected to believe that he had once been more. Much more. A protector of the galaxy, bound to a power he didn't remember. Ilyena watched him with an intensity that seemed to see straight through him, her glowing eyes steady. Her presence was calming, almost magnetic, yet it reminded him of something ancient and urgent. He could feel the weight of history pressing against him, the expectation that he would rise, remember, and fulfill a destiny that had been forgotten. "Leon, we don't have much time," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The structure is calling to you. It is reacting to your presence. That means the dormant energy inside you is starting to wake. You need to allow it." He shook his head, his thoughts a blur. "I don't understand. How can this be real? I'm just a human, just a soldier. I don't have any powers, no abilities like what you're talking about. You've got to be mistaken." Ilyena stepped forward slowly, her bare feet making no sound on the smooth floor. She reached out gently, placing a hand on his arm. Her touch was light but firm, as if grounding him to something beyond his comprehension. "You are not just human, Leon," she whispered. "Not anymore. What they took from you, what you lost, it is still inside you. You have only to remember. The power will awaken when you let go of your fear." Leon recoiled slightly, a surge of panic rising within him. He had always been in control, trained for years to handle the worst situations, to adapt and lead. But this was something else. Something beyond his understanding. "I don't know if I can do this," he murmured, his voice strained. "I don't know how to be what you say I am." Ilyena's expression softened. She pulled her hand back, her eyes reflecting the sadness of someone who had seen too much loss. "The universe has a way of preparing us for what we are meant to become, Leon. Your memories may be lost, but your instincts are not. You have the heart of a protector. It is why I came to you." She paused. "It's why we all have come." A chill ran down Leon's spine at her last words. He glanced around the chamber, the walls now throbbing with a low hum. He felt it, like a pulse beneath his skin, calling him, pulling him closer. There was something undeniable about it, as if the structure itself was aware of his presence, waiting for him to take the next step. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't need to be ready," Ilyena replied. "You simply need to trust." Leon exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. There was a growing sense of urgency in the air, an energy that was becoming harder to ignore. The structure was alive, and the force it emitted was beginning to feel like a living thing, ancient, powerful, and unyielding. What happens if I can't remember? Leon asked, his voice hoarse, laced with fear. Then the galaxy will fall, Ilyana answered simply, her tone flat and resolute. Leon's heart stuttered at her words. There it was again, the weight of something immense pressing down on him. The stakes were higher than anything he could have imagined. But he had no choice. He couldn't walk away now. Whatever this power was, whatever she was asking of him, it was bigger than any personal fear he had. He closed his eyes, trying to clear his thoughts. There had to be something, some connection, some memory, that would make sense of all this. He had trained for this moment. Not for something like this, but for the unexpected. And yet, this was something so far beyond any of his training that it made his previous missions seem trivial in comparison. As he stood there, caught in the uncertainty, Ilyana's voice broke through his thoughts again. You were meant to protect the galaxy, Leon. The Council of Seven feared you because of what you were capable of. They tried to bury your memories, to strip you of your power. But it's still there. You don't need to remember everything. Just trust that the rest will come to you. Leon swallowed, a knot of apprehension in his throat. He didn't know what was going to happen next, but deep inside, a flicker of something stirred. A small spark of hope, maybe. Or something darker. He wasn't sure. But just as he thought he might turn away, an unexpected warmth spread through his chest. It was subtle at first, a gentle pressure beneath his ribs, like the feeling of being enveloped in something bigger than himself. His fingers tingled as if charged with static electricity, and his body hummed in response. Do you feel it? Ilyana asked, her voice soft, coaxing him forward. Leon nodded, his body instinctively reacting to the strange sensation coursing through him. The warmth grew stronger, and the hum of the structure intensified, now vibrating through his bones. His chest tightened as a flood of fragmented images began to flash through his mind, flashes of star systems, colossal battles, alien ships, and a sense of duty that ran deeper than anything he had ever known. His breath quickened as more images assaulted his mind, of a younger version of himself, standing tall in an ancient hall, a shimmering armor glinting in the light. He held an ornate weapon in his hands, one that pulsed with a strange, luminous energy. Around him, alien beings, his allies, perhaps, watched in reverence. The images were fragmented, slipping in and out of focus, but they were enough. Enough to make him realize that this was real. The memories he had forgotten, the power he had lost, it was all coming back to him, piece by piece. No, he whispered, his voice trembling. This isn't possible. Ilyana stepped forward, her hand hovering over his chest, where the warmth seemed to be radiating from deep inside him. It is, she said gently. It is. Let it come, Leon. You are the protector. You always were. A sudden surge of energy blasted through him, and his vision exploded into pure light. His body jerked as if he were being torn apart, and yet, it didn't hurt. It was like being flooded with power, with knowledge, as everything that had been lost came rushing back. He saw himself, his true self, at the heart of an ancient civilization, standing tall, an unwavering force against an enemy that threatened everything. He was the key, the protector, the one who could wield power beyond comprehension. The light faded, leaving Leon gasping for air, his body trembling with the weight of the revelations. He opened his eyes, and for the first time, he saw it, the armor, the weapon, the mantle of responsibility that had been his for lifetimes. Ilyana was looking at him with a mixture of awe and sadness, but there was something else there, too, a flicker of hope. You remember, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Leon nodded, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The power that flowed through him was overwhelming, but he knew it was his now. It was no longer a burden, it was a calling. And the galaxy, it needed him. Leon stood still, the weight of the newfound power inside him pulsating with each breath. The world around him seemed to shift and warp, as if the very air responded to the presence of the energy now thrumming in his veins. The memories, once distant and fragmented, were clearer now, crystallized into a sharp focus he could no longer deny. He could feel the weight of 1,000 lifetimes pressing on his shoulders, and yet, there was a strange calmness in the chaos that surrounded him. His body felt different, as though it had been rebuilt, remade for this purpose. The structure hummed around him, alive and conscious, as if acknowledging the return of the protector. The low, vibrating pulse reverberated through the chamber like a heartbeat, an ancient heart, older than anything he had ever known. Illyana's presence next to him was grounding, but her eyes held something else now, a kind of reverence, mixed with the sorrow of knowing what lay ahead. "You are not the man you were, Leon," Illyana said softly, her voice barely audible above the hum. "You were reborn for this moment." Leon shook his head slightly, trying to clear his thoughts, but it felt like a fog had settled over his mind, thick and impenetrable. The power inside him was overwhelming, a constant undercurrent of energy that made his skin tingle and his heart beat faster. His breath caught in his throat as the memories of his true self resurfaced, an ancient warrior, a protector, someone capable of wielding unimaginable power. He had once stood among the stars, a force against destruction. But that man had been lost to time. And now, that same power was his again. But what was he supposed to do with it? How could he live up to this? To the galaxy, to Illyana, to the countless beings who had placed their hopes in him? The weight of responsibility settled deeper into his chest, and he could feel his pulse quickening, his breath shallow. "Why me?" Leon finally asked, his voice hoarse. "Why am I the one who's been chosen for this?" Illyana's eyes softened with the same sadness that had marked her face since their first meeting. She stepped closer to him, her steps measured, as though she were moving towards something dangerous and unknown. "Because, Leon, you were always meant to be more than just a soldier. You were chosen before you were born. Before the stars even began to burn in the sky. You were part of a cycle that was meant to protect the galaxy, to prevent the darkness from consuming it. You are the protector, and the galaxy is calling for you." Leon felt the words settle into his mind, heavy and unyielding. He was part of something much larger than himself, a cycle that had been set in motion long before humanity had even begun to explore the stars. But as the weight of the universe pressed down on him, a surge of anger bubbled within him. It was as though the very idea of being forced into this role, of being chosen for something so grand, filled him with frustration. "I didn't ask for this," Leon snapped, his fists clenching at his sides. "I didn't ask to be a part of this cycle. I didn't ask to be some kind of hero, or whatever you think I am. I just want to know who I am. I want to know what's happening to me. I want to know why I'm being dragged into all of this." His words echoed in the chamber, sharp and raw. The intensity of his outburst seemed to shake the walls around him, but Illyana did not flinch. She simply stood there, watching him with a calmness that only seemed to magnify his anger. "You've always known, Leon," she replied quietly. "On some level, you've always known who you are. It's why you've always been different from the others. You may have forgotten the details of your past, but your instincts, your sense of duty, they've never left you. The protector lives inside you. And now, that part of you is awakening, whether you're ready for it or not." Leon closed his eyes, exhaling sharply through his nose. His anger ebbed slowly, replaced by a deep, gnawing sense of helplessness. The force inside him felt like a storm, wild and untamed. How could he possibly control it? How could he wield this power without losing himself? But as the moments passed, a new realization began to dawn on him: he didn't have a choice. He could fight it, resist it, but in the end, the galaxy needed him. Illyana was right, he had always known, deep down, that this moment would come. The memories might have been hidden, but the call had always been there, buried under layers of his past life. Taking a deep breath, Leon opened his eyes again, his gaze locking with Illyana's. "What do I need to do?" His voice was steady now, though it still carried the weight of doubt. Illyana's expression shifted, no longer sorrowful, but resolute, as though she knew the path ahead would be just as difficult for him as it had been for her people. "We must reach the core," she said, her voice strong now, firm in its direction. "The ancient energy, the heart of the galaxy, lies within the core. The Council of Seven knew of it, and it is the key to everything." "The core?" Leon repeated, trying to gather his thoughts. "What's the core? How do we reach it?" Illyana nodded, her expression distant for a moment, as if remembering a past too painful to fully confront. "The core is the center of the Orothians' power, a nexus of energy that sustains life in this galaxy. It's hidden, locked away from those who would misuse it. But the energy there is what binds the stars, the planets, and the people. And it is what you must protect." Leon's chest tightened. "But if this core is so important, why hasn't anyone found it?" Illyana's eyes hardened slightly. "Because the core is not meant to be found by just anyone. The Council of Seven, once guardians of the galaxy, grew corrupt. They saw the core as a weapon to control, to use for their own gain. That's why they erased your memory and tried to bury the truth. But you," she paused, her gaze unwavering. "You can reach it. You were always meant to." The implications of her words hit Leon like a slap. He wasn't just some lost soldier, he was the key to a power older than the galaxy itself. He had to stop the Council of Seven from gaining control of the core, because if they did, they could unravel everything. The entire galaxy could fall into darkness. "Where do we start?" Leon asked, the determination in his voice growing. Illyana gave him a nod, her eyes glimmering with quiet pride. "First, we must go to the ancient city on Calthar. There, we will find the gateway to the core. It is hidden within the ruins, protected by ancient mechanisms. You'll need to unlock the seals. Only the Protector can." Leon took a deep breath, steadying himself. He could feel the pull of the task ahead, the weight of responsibility settling on him. But for the first time since his memories had returned, he didn't feel entirely lost. He wasn't sure if he could handle everything that was coming, but he knew one thing: he couldn't back down now. Too much was at stake. "I'll do it," he said, his voice firm. Illyana nodded, the sadness in her eyes fading, replaced by something else: hope. "I knew you would." The days that followed were a blur. The urgency of their mission left no room for hesitation or doubt. Illyana led Leon through the labyrinthine corridors of the ancient structure, her pace unwavering, as though she had always known the way. Leon, for his part, tried to come to terms with the enormity of what was happening. He was no longer just a soldier, he was something else now, something far beyond what he had ever imagined. The powers inside him were still overwhelming, a constant hum in the back of his mind, like a low-frequency signal that rattled his bones. He could feel it in the air around him, the very structure he was in responding to his presence. It was alive, connected to him in ways he couldn't fully understand. And every moment, it seemed, that power grew stronger. But it wasn't the power that weighed on him the most. It was the responsibility. Illyana's words echoed in his mind: "You are the Protector, Leon." The galaxy needed him. He had to stop the Council of Seven. And to do that, he needed to find the core, the heart of all things. The two of them spent their time preparing, reviewing ancient texts and instructions Illyana had uncovered in her travels. She explained the intricacies of the Orothians, a race of beings that had existed long before humanity had ever stepped onto the galactic stage. They had been the first to harness the ancient energies of the galaxy, using them to create vast civilizations, shape stars, and even bend time itself. But their power had been too great, and in the end, it had destroyed them. The Council of Seven had learned from their mistakes, Illyana said, but in their pursuit of ultimate control, they had gone too far. They had found the core, hidden deep within the galaxy's heart, and intended to use its energy to rule over all life. They had wiped the memories of the protectors, erased their histories, and even tried to suppress the very existence of the core itself. But the protector had always returned. Always. Leon's thoughts were clouded as Illyana's voice pulled him back to the present. "We're almost ready," she said, her tone calm, but there was an urgency beneath it. "We need to move quickly. Time is not on our side." The ancient city of Calthar was located on the edge of the known galaxy, a place long thought to be lost. Few had ever ventured there, and even fewer had returned. The city had been a hub of ancient knowledge, a seat of power for the Arothian rulers. But now it lay in ruins, a decaying reminder of a once great civilization. Leon and Illyana boarded a sleek, silver ship, an Arothian design, one that had been preserved in the ruins of the structure they had left behind. It hummed with the same energy that seemed to radiate from Leon's own body, as if the ship and the protector were connected. As they entered the ship's cockpit, Illyana began inputting coordinates, her hands moving quickly over the controls, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You'll need to be prepared for what we'll find on Calthar," she said as the ship powered up, its engines roaring to life. "The ruins are dangerous. Not just because of the environment, but because of the wards the Arothians placed around it. Only those of the Protector's bloodline can bypass them." Leon nodded, trying to digest her words. It seemed that everywhere they went, more layers of mystery were being revealed, things about the Arothians, about the core, and most importantly, about himself. The deeper he went into this quest, the more he felt the pull of the power inside him, as though it were calling him home. "Don't worry," Illyana continued, her eyes flicking to him with a glimmer of reassurance. "You'll know what to do when the time comes." As the ship hurtled through the vastness of space, Leon found himself staring out into the endless black, his thoughts churning. The galaxy was on the brink of war. The Council of Seven, with their thirst for control, had already begun their move to seize the core. If they succeeded, they would reshape the galaxy in their image, twist it into something unrecognizable. Something dark. Leon clenched his fists. He couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't let it happen. The Protector, he, was the key to stopping them. Calthar loomed ahead, an ancient planet that seemed to shimmer in the distance, its surface a patchwork of ruins and towering spires, remnants of a once great civilization. The air seemed thick with history, with power, and with the weight of the past. As they descended through the atmosphere, the ship's sensors began to alert them to the trap set in place by the Arothians. Ancient wards, just as Illyana had warned, designed to repel any intruders. Leon's mind flared to life. He could sense the wards, the ancient energy fields that had been embedded into the planet. It was as though they were alive, aware of his presence. And yet, he wasn't afraid. The power that had been dormant within him now surged to the surface, guiding him, instructing him on what to do. The ship's landing gear touched down with a soft thud, and the moment the ramp lowered, Leon felt the strange pull again. The air was thick with the remnants of 1,000 years of lost knowledge, and he could feel the very earth beneath him calling out, urging him to move forward. Illyana stepped out of the ship, her eyes scanning the surroundings, her face a mask of determination. She turned to Leon, her gaze steady. "Stay close," she warned. "The city is full of dangers, not just from the environment, but from the ancient technology that's been left behind. The wards will be most active near the heart of the city, where the gateway to the core is hidden. We need to find it before the council does." Leon nodded. His steps were steady as he followed Illyana through the ruins. The landscape before them was both beautiful and eerie, vast, crumbling structures reaching toward the sky, as if trying to hold on to something lost. Strange, glowing symbols were etched into the surfaces of the buildings, their meaning long forgotten. But Leon could feel the significance of them, even if he didn't understand. As they moved deeper into the city, the sense of urgency grew. The further they went, the more alive the city seemed to become, as though the ruins were watching them. Leon could feel it now, the wards. They were everywhere, invisible to the naked eye, but his senses were heightened, and he could almost taste the energy in the air. It was as though the city itself was trying to protect its secrets, to stop them from reaching the heart. They reached the central plaza, a vast open space surrounded by towering columns, all of them inscribed with strange symbols. At the center of the plaza was a massive stone structure, an archway, worn and weathered by centuries of neglect. The gateway to the core, Leon realized. But before they could approach, a deep rumble echoed through the ground. The wards had activated. "Get ready," Ilyana said, her hand slipping into her cloak and pulling out a small device. "This is where it gets dangerous." Leon's heart raced as the ground beneath them trembled. The sky darkened, and a low growl filled the air, as if the city itself was coming alive to stop them. The ground beneath their feet trembled again, and the air crackled with energy. Leon's breath hitched as the ancient city seemed to come to life, the stone and steel structures around them pulsing with an eerie light. He could feel the wards now, their power thrumming through the very air like an invisible storm. He clenched his fists, the energy inside him responding to the ancient forces, a primal awareness awakening deep within him. It was like something was calling to him from within the ruins, urging him forward, urging him to face what was coming. "We don't have much time," Ilyana said, her voice steady but her eyes scanning the surroundings, alert. She held the device in her hand, her fingers moving quickly over its surface. "The wards are activating all over the city. We have to reach the core before the city fully awakens. If we don't..." Before she could finish, the first of the traps triggered. The ground cracked open in front of them with a deafening roar, and a massive creature, part machine, part organic, rose from the earth. Its body was a twisted fusion of metal and living tissue, glowing with the same energy that powered the city. Its eyes were bright, burning with an otherworldly light. Leon's heart raced as the creature locked its gaze on them, its metallic limbs screeching as it flexed. "Get back!" Ilyana shouted, throwing up a protective barrier around them. A shimmering force field surrounded them, but the creature didn't hesitate. With an ear-splitting screech, it lunged toward them, its massive claws slashing through the air. Leon felt the surge of power inside him rise in response. His instincts took over. Without thinking, he stepped forward, his hand glowing with an energy he could barely comprehend. The creature's claws came crashing down on the barrier, but before they could make contact, Leon raised his arm and thrust it forward. A blast of pure energy shot from his hand, striking the creature square in the chest. The impact sent the creature flying backward, its massive form crashing into one of the ruined columns. It let out a mechanical roar, sparks flying from its damaged body. But it wasn't defeated. The creature's eyes glowed brighter, and it turned its attention back to them, its body shifting as it began to regenerate. "What the hell was that?" Leon gasped, his voice hoarse from the intensity of the blast. He could feel the power inside him, raw and uncontrollable, but there was no time to analyze it. "It's a guardian," Ilyana said, her voice tinged with both awe and fear. "One of the Erothian's creations to protect the city from intruders. The energy you just unleashed, it's from the core. You're drawing power from it without even realizing it. You'll need to control it if you want to survive." Leon nodded, but his thoughts were racing. He didn't have time to figure out how to control the power surging through him. The creature was recovering faster than he could react. It roared again, charging them with inhuman speed. Without thinking, Leon charged forward, his body moving on instinct. His hand crackled with energy as he reached out, his palm facing the creature. It wasn't just energy he was wielding now, he could feel the entire city responding to his presence, the ancient energy flowing through his veins, guiding his actions. The creature lunged at him, but Leon wasn't afraid. He raised his other hand and thrust it into the air. A bolt of pure force shot from his palm, and the creature screeched in pain as it was sent flying back once more, crashing into the far wall of the plaza. "Stay down," Leon muttered, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature twitched, but it didn't get back up this time. Leon's breath came in ragged gasps as he tried to steady himself. The power inside him was chaotic, unrefined, but it was undeniable. It was his now. Illyana's voice broke through his haze of adrenaline. We don't have time to waste. The Guardian is just one of many defenses protecting the gateway to the core. We need to keep moving. Leon nodded, though he could feel the weight of the battle already taking its toll on him. He didn't know how much longer he could maintain the surge of power without losing control. But Illyana was right, there was no time to hesitate. They continued through the plaza, the once beautiful city now transformed into a battleground. The ruins seemed to pulse with life, their ancient power awakening as they approached the heart of the city. The air grew thick with energy, and Leon could feel the hum of it under his skin, urging him forward. He could feel the presence of the core, its pull undeniable, but it was distant, hidden somewhere deep within the city. The journey ahead would be treacherous, but Leon had no choice. He had to reach it. As they passed through the shattered remnants of the central plaza, another guardian emerged from the shadows. This one was different, sleeker, more agile. It moved with a deadly grace, its glowing eyes focused intently on them. Without warning, it leapt into the air, its metallic limbs spinning through the air as it aimed to strike. Leon reacted instinctively. He extended his hand, and once again, a wave of energy surged from his body, crashing into the creature and sending it sprawling across the plaza. The creature let out a mechanical howl, but it quickly regained its composure. It was relentless. Leon, you need to focus, Illyana called out, her voice sharp with urgency. You can't keep using that kind of energy. You'll burn yourself out. The energy of the city is linked to the core, but it's also dangerous. You need to control it. Leon gritted his teeth, his muscles aching from the strain of the constant bursts of energy. The creatures were relentless, and he was beginning to feel the toll it was taking on him. The power inside him was vast, but it was also volatile, threatening to consume him if he didn't learn to control it. Then help me control it, he said, his voice strained. Illyana didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, her hands raised as she focused her energy into a calming field around them. The intensity of the power flowing from Leon began to ebb, the chaotic pulse within him slowing to a more manageable level. Illyana's presence was soothing, her energy a counterbalance to his. For the first time, Leon felt the surge inside him steady, like a river that had been calmed by an unseen hand. Focus, Illyana said softly. You are the protector. You have the strength to wield this power, but you must learn to harness it. The core calls to you. Let it guide you. Leon nodded, closing his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. As he did, the power inside him began to shift. The chaos subsided, and he could feel the ancient energy around him. It was like a current, flowing through the city, connecting everything. He reached for it, letting it wash over him, letting it become a part of him. He could feel it now, the connection to the city, to the core, to the very essence of the galaxy. When he opened his eyes again, they were clear. He knew what he had to do. With a final, focused gesture, he raised his hand, and the remaining guardian froze in mid-air, held in place by the very energy that had threatened to consume him. It screeched in defiance, but it was no use. The city's power responded to Leon's call, binding the creature in place. I'm ready, Leon said, his voice steady now. Let's go. Illyana nodded, a look of approval in her eyes. The gateway to the core was close now. It was time to finish what they had started. The ruins of Calthor stretched endlessly before them, a dark labyrinth of crumbled stone and fractured metal. As Leon and Illyana pressed forward, the air grew heavier with every step. The ground beneath them hummed with a deep, resonant vibration, a sound that seemed to come from the very core of the planet itself. The city, ancient and worn, was more alive than ever. Every moment felt charged with unseen energy, as if the city was watching them, aware of their presence, testing them. Leon could feel it now, the pull. The core was close. The power that had been pulsing inside him since the beginning of their journey was reaching its crescendo, like a river gaining momentum before crashing over a cliff. His mind, sharp with the clarity Illyana's calming influence had brought, was now tuned to the rhythms of Calthar's ancient energy. He could sense the heartbeat of the planet, a deep and constant thrum beneath his feet. "I don't like this," Illyana muttered, glancing around. Her eyes scanned the once grand architecture of Calthar with suspicion, though her face remained impassive. "We should have reached the central chamber by now." "We'll find it," Leon said, his voice steady. His gaze was locked ahead, his senses on high alert. "The core is close. I can feel it." The two of them moved deeper into the heart of Calthar, past massive structures that had once been towers of unimaginable height, now reduced to rubble and ruins. Strange, glowing symbols covered the walls, ancient inscriptions in a language that had long since been forgotten. The city's architecture was a testament to a once great civilization, a race of beings who had reached beyond the stars. But it was also a warning. Calthar had been a place of unimaginable power, and that power had been both a gift and a curse. As they rounded a corner, Leon's heart skipped a beat. The entrance to the inner sanctum stood before them, an immense archway made of black stone, its surface etched with intricate patterns of gold that pulsed with faint light. The doorway was framed by two towering statues of Erothian warriors, their faces carved in stoic silence. There was no sign of life, but the oppressive atmosphere inside the chamber was palpable. Leon's hand instinctively went to his sidearm, but he knew that weapons would be useless here. This place wasn't one where firepower could solve their problems. "This is it," Illyana said quietly, her voice filled with awe. She looked at Leon, her face a mixture of excitement and caution. "This is the doorway to the core." They approached the archway slowly, as if the very act of entering would disturb the delicate balance of power that thrummed through the air. Leon could feel the ancient wards around them, protecting the core from intruders, but he knew they wouldn't stop him. He was the protector. The power of the core was already flowing through him, a river that he could no longer deny. As they entered the inner sanctum, the air seemed to shimmer with energy. The walls of the chamber were lined with towering pillars, each etched with the same glowing symbols that adorned the rest of Calthar. The room itself seemed to stretch impossibly deep, the far end lost in shadow. The floor beneath their feet was smooth and polished, reflecting the light of the glowing symbols in an eerie, almost hypnotic way. At the center of the chamber was a large platform, surrounded by a ring of energy that pulsed with a golden light. Atop the platform, suspended in mid-air by an unseen force, was the core itself, an orb of radiant energy, its surface shifting and swirling with a multitude of colors, like a storm contained in a single, fragile sphere. It was beautiful. And terrifying. The core was the heart of the galaxy. It was the source of all energy, all creation, and all destruction. It had the power to shape worlds, to bend time and space itself. And now it was within reach. Leon stepped forward, drawn to the orb, his heart pounding in his chest. The power inside him surged, responding to the presence of the core. His hand reached out, and for a moment, everything seemed to pause, the hum of the city, the pulse of the core, even the beat of his own heart. Everything held its breath. "Leon," Illyana's voice cut through the silence, sharp and warning. "Be careful. The core is not just a source of power. It's a living entity. It has its own will, its own desires. If you take it without understanding the consequences." "I know," Leon said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm raging within him. He knew. He had felt the core's call, its power. But he also knew that he had no choice. The Council of Seven had already begun to move. They were out there, gathering strength. If Leon didn't stop them now, the galaxy would fall under their rule. The core was the only way to stop them. It was the only way to save everything. He took another step forward, his fingers brushing the surface of the core. The moment his skin made contact, a blinding surge of energy shot through him, and the world exploded into light. For a moment, Leon thought he might lose himself completely. The power of the core flooded his mind, consuming him. He could see everything: the galaxy, the stars, the planets, the lives of billions of beings spread across the cosmos. He saw the history of the Erothians, their rise and fall, their mistakes, and their wisdom. He saw the Council of Seven, their faces twisted with ambition, their lust for control threatening to choke the galaxy. He saw the future, his future, woven into the fabric of the stars, tangled with the fate of every living thing. The power was overwhelming. But Leon was the protector. He had always been the protector. He clenched his fists and focused, pulling the energy into himself. The light began to fade, the swirling colors of the core fading into the background as his mind centered. He could feel the power now, not just as a force, but as a living thing, something that could be wielded, something that could be controlled. He reached for it, shaping it with his will, binding it to his own purpose. Ilyana stood back, watching him, her eyes filled with awe and concern. She knew what he was doing. She had warned him, but she also knew that this was his destiny. The protector was the only one who could wield the power of the core and survive. "Leon," she said, her voice soft, almost reverent. "You've done it. You've connected with it. Now you can stop them." Leon nodded, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The power of the core was immense, but he felt it settling inside him, becoming a part of him. His body was exhausted, but his mind was sharp, clearer than it had ever been. He could feel the pulse of the galaxy, the currents of energy that flowed through everything. It was time to end this. He turned to Ilyana, his eyes burning with purpose. "Let's go. The Council of Seven won't wait forever." With the power of the core at his command, Leon knew that he could face whatever challenges lay ahead. He was ready. He was the protector, and this galaxy would be protected. As they turned to leave the sanctum, the air around them shimmered again, and the very walls seemed to tremble. The guardians of the city had not forgotten them. But this time, Leon was not afraid. He had the power now, the power to shape the future. The chamber of the core seemed to collapse behind them as Leon and Ilyana made their way back through the city, the weight of the power now coursing through Leon's veins. It was no longer a vague force, he could control it now, understand its flow, bend it to his will. Each step he took, he felt the core's energy hum inside him, guiding him, sharpening his instincts. The city had been the cradle of the Erothians, but now it was his power, his destiny. But there was little time to savor the victory. The Council of Seven had already begun their own dark ascension. They were not far now, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Ilyana walked beside him, her gaze never straying from the path ahead, but there was something else in her eyes now: respect. When they had first met, she had been skeptical of his potential, unsure whether he could truly wield the power of the core. But now, she saw the change in him. She saw the calm determination, the strength that pulsed through his very being. "Leon," Ilyana spoke, breaking the silence, her voice filled with a quiet urgency. "The time is coming. The Council's agents will be here soon. The wards that protected the city are weakening, they won't hold them off for long." "I know." Leon's voice was firm, but beneath it lay a hint of something else. The power was there, yes, but even he couldn't deny that it came with a weight, a responsibility. A part of him was still struggling to fully comprehend what he had unlocked within himself. The power of the core was a double-edged sword. It was more than just a tool, it was a force of life and death, creation and destruction. The line between hero and tyrant was dangerously thin, and he was walking it now. As they neared the gates of the city, the ground trembled once again, a low, warning rumble that seemed to reverberate from the farthest corners of Calthar. The atmosphere grew heavy, and Leon's senses flared. The air itself seemed to crackle with anticipation. This was it. The time had come. They emerged into the open, and before them stood the blackened spires of the once glorious Calthor skyline, now overshadowed by the looming silhouette of the Council's fleet. The massive warships hovered like dark sentinels above the city, casting long shadows that stretched over the ruins. Each ship was bristling with weaponry, each one powered by the same dark energy Leon had just learned to control. The Council had come to claim the core for themselves, to harness its power and bend the galaxy to their will. But Leon had a different vision. He turned to Ilyana. "Get to the ship. I'll handle this." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she nodded without hesitation. She had always believed in his potential, but now she saw him not just as a man with a mission, but as the protector, the one who could shift the balance of power. She didn't question his decision. She knew his strength now. Without another word, she turned and began sprinting toward their escape route. Leon's gaze lingered on her for just a moment longer before he squared his shoulders and walked toward the battlefield. Every step he took felt heavier now, not from the weight of the power, but from the realization of what this moment meant. He wasn't just protecting Calthor or his people anymore, he was deciding the fate of the galaxy. The Council's agents were already assembling, hundreds of dark-clad soldiers and operatives, led by the menacing figures of the Council itself. The 7 rulers of the galaxy stood atop their ships, looking down upon him with the arrogance only those who believed themselves to be untouchable could possess. "You think you can stand against us?" The voice of Zealer, the High Chancellor, echoed across the battlefield. He was tall, wearing ornate black armor etched with glowing runes that matched the energy pulsing in the core. His eyes gleamed with malice as he looked down at Leon from his command ship. "I think I already have," Leon replied, his voice carrying across the distance, stronger than ever. He raised his hand, the power of the core surging from his palm. The air shimmered with energy as bolts of light shot up into the sky, cutting through the dark clouds that had begun to swirl ominously above. He was in control now. He felt it in every fiber of his being. The city, the core, it all answered to him. The Council members reacted in unison, their ships sending down waves of energy as they tried to retaliate. But Leon was faster. He raised his arms, his mind concentrating on the currents of power that flowed through him. He guided the energy of the core like a conductor guiding an orchestra, weaving bolts of raw, focused energy to strike at the enemy fleet. The blast of light collided with the dark ships, sending shockwaves that echoed through the city. The ships rocked and swerved, their hulls buckling under the sheer force of the energy. Leon's heart pounded as he focused his will, directing the core's energy with precision, dismantling the weapons of the enemy one by one. For every ship that fell, for every weapon that went dark, the Council's hold on the galaxy weakened. He could hear their desperate shouts now, their curses and orders growing frantic. "You're nothing," Zealer shouted, his voice crackling with fury. "Do you think you can stop us? You are a child wielding a weapon beyond your comprehension." Leon's lips curled into a slight smile, but there was no humor in it. "I'm not the child. You are." With a single, focused motion, Leon channeled all the power of the core into one final, devastating blast. The energy surged through his body, far beyond anything he had ever felt. It was like the pulse of the galaxy itself, pure and unrestrained. The blast tore through the sky, a wave of golden light that collided with the lead ship of the Council. The ship exploded in a magnificent fireball, its dark form consumed by the light. The shockwave spread outward, shattering the remaining fleet's defensive systems. The remaining ships scattered in retreat, their commanders too dazed and disoriented to mount any meaningful resistance. And then, there was silence. Leon stood alone on the battlefield, breathing heavily, his body trembling from the immense power he had just unleashed. The core's energy was ebbing now, its presence still within him, but not as overwhelming as before. The storm of battle had passed, but the cost had been high. The city lay in ruins around him, but Calthor had survived. The remaining members of the Council's forces were in retreat, scattered and leaderless. The galaxy would now have a chance to rebuild, free from their oppressive grip. Leon had done it. He had stopped them. Ilyana's voice broke through the silence, calling his name from behind. He turned to see her running toward him, a look of relief on her face. She slowed as she approached, stopping a few feet away. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with awe. "You really did it." Leon nodded, his heart still racing, but he knew that the real work had only just begun. The galaxy would need rebuilding. There would be chaos, and there would be challenges ahead. But for the first time in a long while, Leon felt that he wasn't alone. Together, they would protect this new dawn. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said, his voice steady, looking out at the vast horizon. "We both have a role to play now." And as they stood there, beneath the towering ruins of Calthar, the future stretched out before them, uncertain, but full of possibility. The galaxy would heal. And the Protector would watch over it. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. For more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon, so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.